My stepmom banned my epileptic husband from my dad's birthday, so I exposed her cruelty, and now my dad's divorcing her. Hey there. So, my dad, he's 50, just filed for divorce from my stepmom, who's 44. And now she, along with a bunch of her friends, are pointing the finger at me like I'm the reason their marriage fell apart. But honestly, I don't think that's fair, and I definitely don't believe it's my fault. I mean, it's not exactly shocking that they're blaming me, especially considering Sharon, that's what I'll call my stepmom, and I never really clicked. We didn't fight or anything like that, but there was just never any real connection between us. She's just not someone I ever pictured for my dad. Always came across as kind of fake, shallow, and a little too into appearances. She married my dad when I was 16, but they'd been dating for about 3 years before tying the knot. Back when they were just dating, she'd put on this overly sweet act around me. It was pretty obvious she was just trying to make a good impression because I was the daughter of the guy she was seeing. I could tell it wasn't genuine, but my dad seemed happy, so I kept quiet. I mean, it's not like she did anything terrible, and I wasn't about to ruin his happiness just because I didn't vibe with her. That would have been petty. But now, looking back, a part of me kind of wishes I had said something. About a year before they got married, Sharon moved in with us. And right away, she started getting on my nerves. She had this pushy, controlling energy, always trying to change things around the house. Supposedly she was trying to improve the place, but in reality, all she was doing was replacing the things my mom had picked out. And she knew those things mattered. My mom had great taste, and my dad used to brag about it when guests came over. For context, my mom passed away in a car accident when I was 7. She was a wonderful woman, loved by everyone, and we all missed her terribly. Every now and then, when we had visitors, people would bring her up and share memories. My dad and I would join in too, reminiscing about the good times. It didn't happen all the time, but when it did, both of us would usually get a little emotional. Losing her so young left a mark, and that pain never fully went away. I think Sharon was jealous of that, jealous of the way people still talked about my mom, the way we still loved her. That's why, little by little, she started erasing my mom from the house. At first, it was subtle, replacing decorations and changing the wallpaper. Then she moved on to bigger things. She convinced my dad to pack away all of my mom's clothes and store them in the attic to make room for her own stuff. I could understand that part, to an extent. But then she said she wasn't comfortable having pictures of my mom around, and she had every single photo taken down, even the family ones we had all together. I thought that was way too extreme. I pushed back hard, but my dad told me this was our new family now, and that my mom would have wanted everyone to feel happy and comfortable. I didn't agree, but I let it go. Still, deep down, I knew what was happening. Sharon was trying to replace my mom. I could kind of understand feeling insecure. I mean, it's tough to live in someone else's shadow, especially when that someone is no longer around. You can't really compete with a memory. But Sharon had my dad, and my mom was gone. She already had what she wanted, so why the jealousy? People only brought up my mom because she died so young. It was a shock for all of us, and the pain didn't just disappear over time, especially for those of us closest to her, her family. So yeah, we kept her memory alive the best way we could, and that meant talking about her sometimes. It was never meant to disrespect Sharon, but she didn't seem to get that. If she had any real empathy, she would have understood that she wasn't supposed to replace my mom, just be her own person. That would have been enough. But instead, she got weird about it. She made it into this awkward competition, like she needed to win my dad over completely. That's when she started trying to act like my mother. And let me tell you, her idea of being a mom was all about control. I guess she thought I'd find it sweet or touching, but honestly, it just drove me crazy. She was constantly bossing me around, always handing out unwanted advice about boys, about clothes, even about school. And here's the kicker, she didn't even have a college degree herself, yet she acted like she was some expert on everything. Worse, she wasn't even nice about it. She always had this condescending tone, like she was talking to a toddler instead of a teenager. I was 16, not a little kid, and even if I was still figuring things out, that didn't mean I was clueless. The way she talked down to me, it didn't come from a place of love or concern. It came from this urge to make me feel small, like I was beneath her somehow. She'd keep telling me she was my second mother, and I found that more creepy than comforting. I didn't like it at all. After a few months of trying to be patient, I finally had to put my foot down and tell her to stop. She wasn't my mom, and she couldn't just force her way into that role, especially when I never asked her to. I already had a mother, and I'll always love her, no matter how much time has passed. I didn't need or want a replacement, and Sharon trying to be one just felt wrong. She did eventually ease up after that. Stop trying so hard to play the mom card. But that didn't mean she left me alone. She still talked to me like I was a clueless little kid, still carried that same holier-than-thou attitude. The only difference now was that she wasn't giving me advice anymore, which, honestly, was a relief. But just when I thought I could breathe, she found a new way to get under my skin. Instead of dealing with me directly, she started dragging my dad into things. If she had a concern, she'd run to him and have him bring it up with me, like I was some kind of problem that needed to be handled. It was just another way for her to stay in control, even after I'd asked her to back off. Here's just a small example of the kind of stuff Sharon used to pull. When I was 17, I was having some issues with this girl at school who was being really nasty to me for no reason at all. I'd been venting about it to a few friends over text, nothing major. Somehow, Sharon got into my phone and saw the messages. I guess she was snooping around, like she always did. But because I'd already told her to back off and stop trying to parent me, she didn't come to me directly. Instead, she sent my dad in to have a talk. And while it was technically his voice, I could tell right away those weren't his words, they were hers, plain and simple, coming out of his mouth like a puppet. Then there was the time I got accepted into college. My dad had thrown me a small party to celebrate, and right in the middle of it, Sharon starts talking about how she thought I would have chosen a better school. Like, seriously? I'd just gotten into a college I was proud of, and she found a way to make it feel like I'd done something wrong. That was just her always throwing in little jabs, making moments that should have been happy feel kind of sour. By the time I moved out for college, I was beyond relieved to get away from her. I think it's pretty clear why I only came home during the holidays. Even then, I tried to keep those visits short because dealing with Sharon always left me drained. She treated me the same way no matter how old I got, like I was still some clueless little kid. And while I wouldn't say we were openly hostile, it definitely wasn't a warm or friendly relationship. I never liked her, and I don't think she cared much for me either. Anyway, not too long ago, she reached out and invited me to this big 50th birthday party she was throwing for my dad. She made it sound like a huge event, said she'd invited all his friends and most of the extended family. I was honestly surprised to hear she'd even gone so far as to invite my maternal grandparents, especially since she always hated that my dad kept in touch with his former in-laws. So, I figured maybe she was trying to be mature for once. That gave me a tiny sliver of hope. She planned to host the party at one of my dad's favorite restaurants, and it was shaping up to be a big deal. But then, out of nowhere, she told me she wanted to talk to me in person a few days before the event. That caught me off guard. I mean, we hadn't exactly kept in touch over the years, so I couldn't imagine what she'd possibly need to say to me. Still, I agreed to meet her, thinking maybe it was something related to the party setup or budget. So, 3 days ago, we met at a little coffee shop near my place. From the second she walked in, it was the same old act. She started talking to me like I was a child, using this overly sweet, fake tone that even made the people around us give us weird looks. And just so we're clear, I'm not imagining this. The way she talks to me, it's really that bizarre and condescending. It's not like I was inventing reasons to dislike her, she was genuinely just that difficult to deal with. After some awkward small talk, she finally got to the point. I assumed she was going to ask for help organizing the party or something. But no, she looked me dead in the eye and told me I wasn't allowed to bring my husband, Jason, to my dad's birthday. And the reason she gave me. I still can't believe she actually said it. Let me back up for a second. Jason, who's 24 now, and I have been together since 9th grade. We've been married for 2 years, and he's the love of my life, my best friend, my soulmate, whatever word you want to use, he's it. Everyone in our lives has always known we were meant to be, and we made it official as soon as we were able. Jason also has epilepsy. He's had it since he was a kid, and while he takes medication, sometimes he still gets seizures. I've known this about him from day one, and it's never bothered me. It's part of who he is, and I love him for everything he is. I've always expected others to show the same respect and understanding, because it's a medical condition, something he has no control over. Using it against him is just cruel. So when Sharon told me I couldn't bring him because she was afraid he might have a seizure in front of the guests, I was speechless. That wasn't just rude, it was ableist, plain and simple. And it took everything in me not to throw my coffee right in her face. Instead, I just stood up, didn't say a single word, and walked straight out. I got into my car, drove home, and blocked her number the moment I got through the door. I declined the invitation without a second thought. But even after all that, I couldn't shake the anger. I sat on the couch, trying to hold it together, but I ended up sobbing. I was just so angry and hurt. That was my dad's birthday party. Sure, she was organizing it, but that didn't give her the right to say something so cruel, especially about the one person I love just as much as I love my dad. And I know she said it on purpose to hurt me. She knows how much Jason means to me. He's been in my life since I was 13. Sharon knows our history. She knows how fiercely I protect him, especially when people treat him like he's any less of a person because of his condition. Jason is one of the strongest people I know. He deals with something most folks can't even begin to understand, and he does it with grace and strength. So for her to say something like that, knowing full well how I'd feel, it wasn't just inappropriate, it was downright disgusting. Jason's my husband. We're a team. We go to things together, especially family events like this one. Sharon had no business telling me who I could or couldn't bring. That's not her place. While I was sitting there crying, I tried to keep it quiet. I didn't want Jason to see me like that or worry. But he heard me and came rushing into the room, immediately trying to comfort me. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him everything she said. And then I admitted something that had been weighing on me for a long time. I told him how hard it's become for me to stay close with my dad, because, well, Sharon comes with the package. They're a team too, just like Jason and me. And while I don't want to hurt their relationship, I also can't keep subjecting myself to Sharon's constant disrespect. I've already cut back my visits to my dad's house because of her. But now, she's put me in a position where I might have to step away completely. I tried to talk to my dad before about the way Sharon treated me growing up, the way she talked down to me and made me feel small, but he always brushed it off. He insisted that she meant well, that she just cared about me and wanted what was best. But concern doesn't look like that. Love doesn't feel like that. And honestly, I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. That's basically why she treated me the way she did, because I was still just a teenager, and my dad didn't fully realize how far Sharon would go with her bizarre behavior. To him, she was just a little overbearing, maybe annoying at times, but not harmful. So he didn't think it was worth stepping in. But this? This was something else entirely. Jason sat with me, holding me close while I cried. When I finally calmed down, he gently told me that unfortunately, he was used to people making comments like that about his condition. It didn't hurt him anymore, not because it shouldn't, but because he'd built up this wall after years of dealing with ignorance. And that in itself was heartbreaking. It shouldn't have to be that way. He also told me something I really needed to hear, that I had to talk to my dad about this. That this situation was different. It was more serious than anything before. And even though Jason wasn't personally offended, he could see how upset I was, and he knew it was time for me to finally confront my father. So after that talk with Jason, I felt a little steadier, like I had something I could actually do to make this right. I'd already declined the online invite to the party, so Sharon would know she crossed a line, but that didn't feel like enough. She had gone way too far this time, and she needed to be put in her place. That evening, I called my dad. I told him exactly what Sharon had said to me at the coffee shop. I explained that I couldn't, in good conscience, come to his party anymore, not after what she'd done. I told him that, as much as I loved him, I didn't think I could keep having a relationship with him if this was the kind of treatment I had to accept. What Sharon said wasn't just offensive, it was humiliating, to both me and Jason. And I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. I also told him that I knew he loved Sharon, and that's why he always tried to see the best in her. He wanted to believe she treated me like a child because she cared and wanted to connect. But I knew the truth, Sharon acted that way because she needed to feel like she had control. And when she couldn't get it, she'd lash out in petty, underhanded ways. This whole thing with Jason? It was just another example. I had so much frustration bottled up over the years, and I just let it all pour out. My dad listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said he was sorry. Genuinely sorry. He said what Sharon had said about Jason was absolutely unacceptable, completely unforgivable, and that he could understand exactly why I was so upset. He told me he loved Jason like he was his own son and couldn't even imagine celebrating his birthday without him there. Then he said he'd talk to Sharon and make sure she apologized to me personally and sincerely. That was the end of our conversation for that night. We hung up, and even though the situation wasn't fixed, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I'd finally spoken my truth. Jason and I tried not to dwell on it too much after that. We didn't hear anything from either my dad or Sharon for a couple of days, so we assumed they were working things out or just avoiding the issue. Then, this morning, I got a message from my aunt. She said my dad had filed for divorce. I was completely floored. I hadn't seen that coming at all. She texted me asking if I knew anything about it, but I was just as surprised as she was. I had no clue this was even happening. So I called my dad right away. I needed to know what was going on. When he picked up, he said he was actually planning to call me. And the first thing he told me was that he had filed for divorce from Sharon and was currently staying in a hotel not too far from the house. He asked if I could come see him so he could explain everything face to face. I dropped everything and went straight over there. Work, errands, none of it mattered in that moment. When I walked into his hotel room, he hugged me right away. Not a quick, awkward hug, but the kind of hug where you know someone's carrying a lot of guilt. And then he apologized. He apologized for everything, for putting me through so much over the years, for being selfish, and for prioritizing his own happiness over my well-being. He said he'd spent a long time convincing himself that Sharon was a good match for our family because she made him happy when they were alone. But deep down, he'd known something wasn't right for a while. He admitted he saw how insecure and jealous she was of my mom, a woman who wasn't even here anymore. And he noticed how Sharon would constantly try to bring me down, make me feel small, chip away at my confidence. He told me he let all of that slide for far too long. He ignored the signs because, in his mind, Sharon made him happy, and that felt like enough. But recently, things had started to spiral. Their relationship had become tense, even toxic. She was constantly accusing him of still being hung up on my mother, and no matter how much he tried to reassure her, it never seemed to be enough. Every argument turned into a comparison between her and my mom, and she always made herself the victim. He said it had gotten exhausting, emotionally draining. And the thing she said about Jason? That was the final straw. He told me that when he confronted Sharon about it, she didn't even try to apologize. She didn't feel bad at all. She said she was just trying to make things perfect for him and that he should have been grateful. When he tried to explain that excluding Jason was cruel and humiliating, not only to me but to him as well, she flipped it on him. She claimed he was being unfair and accused him of making her out to be the villain, even though she clearly was in the wrong. That was it for him. He told her if she wanted to play the victim, she could do it without him. He packed a bag and walked out that same night. Moved straight into the hotel. The next morning, he called his lawyer and got the divorce papers drawn up. He said the only reason he hadn't told me sooner was because he felt ashamed that he hadn't protected me better, that he let this go on for so long. He felt like he'd failed as a father, and I think, in some ways, that hit him harder than anything else. That conversation was heavy, emotional in a way we hadn't shared in years. But it was necessary. We both needed it more than we realized. After everything was out in the open, we made a decision: we were going to try to rebuild our relationship, repair the damage, and give ourselves a chance to move forward, together. Because in spite of everything that had happened, we still loved each other. And that mattered. I love my dad. I always have, and I never wanted to lose him. During our talk, he mentioned that he had already announced the divorce in the family group chat, one I'm not actually part of. That group gets flooded with messages constantly, and honestly, I prefer connecting with people face to face anyway. So, I ended up being one of the last to find out, and he had to call me personally to tell me about it. Apparently, after posting the message to the group, he sent the same one directly to Sharon. He hadn't heard back from her yet, but at that point, it didn't really matter. He was moving forward with the divorce no matter what. Whether she replied or not, she'd still have to respond legally. It was done, and there was no going back. After that conversation, I went home feeling relieved. Finally, it felt like this whole thing with Sharon was coming to an end. But sadly, Sharon wasn't quite done with me yet. A few hours later, she called me from a different number. And the moment I picked up, she just exploded. She was yelling at me, full volume, accusing me of every horrible thing you can think of. According to her, I had destroyed her marriage, and I was the absolute worst. She went on and on about how I'd always hated her because I worshipped my mom and couldn't handle anyone stepping into her place. But here's the thing: my dad dated other women after my mom passed away, and I never had an issue with any of them. That story she made up about me being jealous or territorial? Total nonsense. She also claimed that the only reason she told me not to bring Jason to the party was to save us all from embarrassment, and that her intentions were good. Apparently, I was the one who twisted it into something malicious because I just hated her so much for no reason. She was slurring her words and barely making sense. It was clear she was drunk. And, for a second, I actually felt sorry for her. But since that call, I've been sitting with this weird feeling, this nagging sense of guilt. Like maybe I had pushed things too far by telling my dad what happened. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't do anything wrong. Update 1: It's been a couple of days since everything went down, and honestly, I don't know why I was second-guessing myself. I guess because she sounded so broken during that call, I let myself feel bad for her. But the truth is, Sharon brought all of this on herself. She said something cruel and dehumanizing about my husband, and then expected me to just accept it. I mean, seriously, what did she think I was going to say? Oh yeah, you're right, Sharon. My husband has epilepsy, so maybe he shouldn't come with me to my own dad's birthday party? That's ridiculous. No one in their right mind would go along with something like that. I guess I'm just a sensitive person, and that's why I initially felt bad for her. But not anymore. Jason and my dad both reassured me that I did the right thing by speaking up. What she said wasn't just a slip-up, it was deeply insulting, and it wasn't the first time she acted this way. She's been talking down to me and acting like she's above everyone since I was 13. She had plenty of chances to fix things, to check herself, to show even a little self-awareness. But she never did. And if she thinks this kind of behavior is normal, then that's on her. Besides, how could I have possibly known things were already rocky between her and my dad? He doesn't share those things with me, and Sharon and I? We're not friends. We barely talk. So no, I didn't sabotage anything, she just finally got called out. And honestly, it was long overdue. Update 2: My dad called me today with some news. He's still having the birthday party. And honestly, that makes total sense. Sharon paid for it using his card, and she's no longer invited, so why not go through with it? Jason and I are definitely going. It's in 3 days, and we've already started making plans. On top of that, my dad and I have agreed to start therapy together. We really want to work on our relationship, and we both know this isn't something we can fix on our own. Jason's super supportive of the idea, and I'm actually feeling excited about it. My dad and I used to be close, and now it kind of feels like I'm reconnecting with an old friend. That's the best way I can describe it. Still no word from Sharon about the divorce itself, but I'm not surprised. She's probably off somewhere licking her wounds. And honestly, she should feel embarrassed. Update 3: The party was today, and it turned out way better than I expected. Given everything that had happened, I thought it might be awkward or tense, but it wasn't. It was actually really fun. All of my dad's friends and a ton of our family showed up. And the best part? No one mentioned Sharon. Not once. It was exactly what we needed. Jason and I had the absolute best time. We drank, we danced until our feet were sore, and for the first time in what feels like forever, I laughed freely around my dad. At one point, we were dancing in the living room together like we used to when I was little. It brought back so many memories. It just felt good. Like healing in motion. I hope we can have more days like that. Update 4: Well, Sharon finally responded to the divorce petition, and surprisingly, she's not contesting it. I honestly thought she'd put up a fight, but nope. That said, she is demanding a huge amount in alimony, which I personally think is ridiculous, but that's between her and the lawyers now. I'm staying out of that mess. The legal proceedings and settlement talks are set to begin in the next few days. I just hope things stay civil and don't spiral into something ugly. On the bright side, my dad and I have officially started therapy together. And it's going really well so far. We've also made a plan to have lunch or dinner together at least once a week, just the two of us. We're serious about rebuilding this relationship, and I finally feel like we're heading in the right direction.